Just ahead on American Black Journal, the nation commemorates the 50th anniversary of the famous March on Washington. We'll have the stories of two Detroit women who took part in the 1963 march, and we'll preview a PBS documentary web series that examines how far we've come in 50 years. Plus, Detroit high school students travel through the South on a civil rights history tour. That's all coming up next.
Lindsay wants to know.
So I'm curious, what's DTE Energy doing to improve their customer service?
Why don't we take a ride over there and let Rachel tell us? Hello.
Hello. Take a walk with me. Here at DTE Energy, we're working very hard to improve our service, like answering every call under 1 minute and resolving the issue on the first call.
Wow, no passing the buck, huh?
Nope. And plus, we're adding over 100 customer service jobs right here in the state of Michigan.
I need to get a real job.
I'm going to send your application.
Thanks, Rachel. DTE Energy. Know your own power.
When I grow up, I want to be an architectural engineer.
A registered nurse.
In the law enforcement.
A computer scientist.
A successful person.
Give Michigan's children the chance to aim high with quality early education.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. On August 28th, the nation marks the 50th anniversary of the famous March on Washington, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech to 250,000 people. Several events are taking place this weekend and throughout the week in remembrance of the march. Here at American Black Journal, we talked with two Detroit women who attended the 1963 March on Washington, as well as the Detroit Walk to Freedom that occurred in June of that year. Here are their stories.
This was a huge march, and it was big for our city, and it was big for the country. And at the time, it was the largest march for civil rights in the country. I just remember whatever corner I turned to go onto Woodward Avenue that Sunday, that there were so many people, and it appeared as if the whole town had turned out to march. Church groups turned out, unions, schools. It seemed like everybody in Detroit was on Woodward Avenue that day. And it was just very, very exciting and stimulating as a young person to see that kind of turnout. At the time, I was just getting involved in the struggle for human rights and civil rights. And so this was very encouraging to me. Medgar Evers had just been killed in Mississippi. So that was one of the central themes about the march, was supporting the struggle in Mississippi. Dr. King, of course, filled Cobo Hall. There were only two people who could fill Cobo Hall at the time, and that was James Brown and Dr. King. Dr. King just had a wonderful way with words. And so to hear I Have a Dream for the first time, it was absolutely wonderful.
So this afternoon, I have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day, right down in Georgia and Mississippi and Alabama, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to live together as brothers. I have a dream this afternoon.
The March on Washington, I went as well. As I was listening to the speech, I realized that Dr. King's fixed the speech. He made it better, he improved upon it, but it was obviously the same basic speech as the one that was held in Detroit. And we've always been proud, and every time I get the opportunity, I let people know that the original I Have a Dream speech was delivered here in Detroit.
One evening in October of 2008, I got a phone call from my cousin Marcia, who lives in Baltimore, Maryland. She had been browsing a catalog with some friends and came across a 2009 Black History calendar. On the front of this calendar were pictures of Dr. King and Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Jesse Owens, and on the back of the calendar were these same people, but also there was a picture of me. I, of course, immediately recalled being at the March on Washington, but I didn't recall a picture being taken. She directed me to a website, and I went and looked it up, and sure enough, there was this little girl's face that I just could not believe it was me. It took a while for it to sink in. Actually, it took quite a while, more than a few days. Since then, I've found that it's been in publications and textbooks and documentaries, so it's been a very exciting experience for me. My recollections of the March on Washington on August 28th are very special to me. My mother took me there after hearing Dr. King make an appeal to participants in Detroit, our home, because of all the problems that were happening in the South with segregation and racial injustice and inequality. It also happened to be my 12th birthday. That day in Washington was a very hot day, but it was a day where a lot of people from all over the country came together for a common goal, and that was to make the quality of life better for everyone. It was very special to me to be there, to be one of the people present to make a difference in what Dr. King had brought to our attention.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
I had done a report when I returned home on how I spent my summer vacation. So the banner was displayed on a poster board along with a typed report and photos taken from either a Look or a Life magazine. Unfortunately, the report and the board was damaged in a fire, as was the banner. But it's been restored as best as possible, so it's something that's always remained something very special to me and a remembrance of a very important day.
So what impact has the 1963 march had on jobs, freedom, and segregation? This week, PBS is premiering a documentary web series called The March at 50. The 5-part series takes a contemporary look at the legacy of the march and looks ahead to the future. Here's a preview.
It's been 50 years since the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. So this 50th anniversary of the march makes me want to ask, how far have we come?
The paradigm of race that we lived with in the 60s that led to the March on Washington, those times are fading.
We now have a black president. However, we still live in a society where there continues to be significant inequality based on both race and class.
At the time of Obama's inauguration, young black men who dropped out of high school were more likely to be incarcerated than they were to be employed.
In this 5-part series, I'll examine the impact of the march on our lives today with a look at jobs, freedom, voting rights, public school segregation, and the way forward.
This 50th anniversary should not be a look backwards, but we really hope that people will ask the question, what is America prepared to become?
The March at 50 premieres August 26th on pbs.org. Just ahead on American Black Journal, local students get a history lesson of a lifetime. We'll talk with them about their 2-week Freedom Tour sponsored by the Michigan Coalition for Human Rights. That's all coming up next. This summer, a group of Detroit area students embarked on a civil rights history tour that took them to several cities in the South, including Atlanta, Georgia, Montgomery, Alabama, and Meridian, Mississippi. They visited many of the same sites where freedom riders bravely challenged segregation in the 1960s. The trip was called Freedom Tour 2013, and it was sponsored by the Michigan Coalition for Human Rights. Joining me now is one of the coalition's board members, Dorothy Dewberry Aldridge. We also saw Dorothy at the beginning of the program as she talked about her memories of marching in Detroit and Washington 50 years ago. Joining her are two students who went on the Freedom Tour this summer, Carly Winfrey and DeMonte Thompson. Welcome all of you to American Black Journal.
Good to be here.
So tell me about the idea for this tour. Where'd that come from?
Well, the Michigan Coalition for Human Rights did the tours in the late 80s, 89, and for about 5 years. And the idea is to tour and to visit the historic civil rights sites so that the young people can see if there's any parallel, one, in the situation that we're facing now, and what lessons can they learn from the courage and the, self-determination that the people in the South did.
Right. So on this tour, though, what are those sites like 50 years later? I mean, are there markers? Are there things that would remind you of the things that happened there?
Right. There are markers. There are new museums.
Okay.
And give you, for instance, Viola Liuzzo, who was a housewife from Detroit, that was killed in 1965. Sure. There's a wonderful monument to her in Lowndes County, Alabama. And the monument we visited, and the young people saw, for instance, also that there's a fence around the monument because people still deface and are angry about her participation.
Is that right?
Yes.
That right? Even today they have to have
even
a fence
today,
around it.
And also in Meridian, they do the same thing, Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner. And Albert Turner, who was one of the persons who led the Selma to Montgomery March at his gravesite. So that's a theme throughout these monuments.
Okay. So Carly, you are a teenager growing up here in Detroit. Had you ever been down south before?
I have many times. My dad's from Nashville, Tennessee, and my mom's from Grambling, Louisiana. So every summer I go down to Tennessee or Louisiana for 2 weeks.
Okay, and when you go, do you notice that part of the country feeling different than here? Does it seem like it's not Detroit to you?
It does to a degree, but I've been going there so much that it feels like home.
Yeah.
So I don't feel much of a difference.
Right. Right, but what about the tour? When you saw some of these sites?
After the tour, it's definitely different since I've never spent time in Alabama or Mississippi, but you can definitely get a different vibe there, and it was a nice difference to go.
A nice difference in what way?
It was refreshing to be in an area that's so historically rich. And you can feel it in the air. You can feel the eeriness that still surrounds it because of its history.
Because of the history. What about you, DeMonte? Had you spent much time in the South before this tour?
Well, I spent some time. I haven't spent a lot. My grandmother's actually from Mississippi, so I've been there before. But as for Atlanta or Alabama, never really at all been there.
Yeah.
And when I got there, I didn't know like so much until afterwards. Like, there's so many sights to see, there's so much to learn, there's so much that going down there can really do to you. It can like really open your eyes wider. You wouldn't like know the stuff that we have been taught.
Sure.
You wouldn't just think to look it up on the internet or anything.
Yeah, it's different when you see it up close,
It's
right?
very different. Yeah. It's like going back in time, actually. If you would look at the house that Martin Luther King lived in, was born in, and the house that was bombed, and it's so amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've been involved with this for some time.
Oh, some time.
What are the things that you feel like the kids learn overall from doing this?
Well, they learn strategies and tactics. They learn things, how to deal with bullying, how to deal with the issues of the day, and actual how-tos. And also, as DeMonte said, their eyes are open and they find out information they hadn't guessed before. For instance, we saw Mrs. Boynton Robinson, who is 107 years old. And the young people really liked her quite a bit because she was left for dead on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in 1965, and so she's now still able to tell her story, and that was one of the ones that the young people really enjoy.
Sure.
Right.
So one of the things that's always struck me about the civil rights movement, and particularly the Edmund Pettus Bridge and the incident there, was that the people who were involved in that were not much older, in fact, than Carly and DeMonte.
Some younger.
Some even much younger.
Right.
Tell me about how that felt to see that and think of someone your age doing what those people did.
When we went to the Edmund Pettus Bridge and we walked across it with our signs, it was so interesting to know that you walked 50 years after people younger than you, who they walked across that, but for a much bigger reason than what you are today. Sure. And then to know that when you looked down from that bridge, that there were a sea of police officers with their dogs and their horses and their guns and their batons ready to beat you.
Yeah.
And that once they got to the bottom, they were beaten back off the bridge, down the streets, down the town, into their homes and into their churches, and that it didn't stop at the bridges. They were being pulled out of their homes, beaten on the streets, thrown through church windows. And it was just, it was so powerful knowing that I have the freedom to be able to safely walk across this bridge because of the 11-year-olds that did it 50 years ago.
Right. DeMonte?
As I remember, before we walked across, we had met a woman who actually was involved in that, by the name of Joanne Bland. She was younger than us. She was there with Dr. King, and I remember when we got there, she had told us how she had done it so long ago, how it felt great that we could do it now, and we would not have the same treatment.
It wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same experience. Yeah.
No, but she had gave us all like such a big welcome, such a big hug, and it was amazing because I believe at the age of 11, she said she's been arrested and sent to prison so many times for marching on that bridge. We were able to go there with our signs and protest freely,
and not be bothered. Speaking of being much younger, 50 years ago,
yes.
You were part of the marches here in Detroit and,
yes.
and Washington. Tell me about how that feels now, 50 years later, the change that's taken place, the change that hasn't taken place. What are some of the things that you feel like that we're still struggling with?
Well, we're still struggling with voting rights.
Absolutely.
We were, when we were marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge just this time, the Supreme Court had taken away some of our rights.
Right, in the Voting Rights Act case.
That's right.
Sure.
Just then, we're in danger now of going backward. More poverty, more, and one of the issues was Medgar Evers had been killed, and the Big Four was a big thing in Detroit in 1963. And so all of these police brutality and our rights are still in question. Sure. It's better in some ways, but we're in danger of going back.
How do you, and we hear this all the time, I feel like right now, how do you sort of insert the election of Barack Obama into that calculus? I mean, on the one hand, it's clearly just a remarkable achievement and a sign of progress, but at the same time, all the things that you're talking about are still going on. How do you reconcile those two things?
Well, his election, Barack Obama, was a remarkable thing, and if Dr. King had been here now, he would have been immensely proud, and he predicted, of course,
that we would get to that point.
That we would get to that point. The election, it's up to us, however, to keep pressure on all of our elected officials to make sure that they live up to the promises that they made. And Barack Obama said such a thing, that it's up to the electorate and up to us to make sure that he delivers.
Carly, as a young person, you're growing up in a time where one of your first memories of who is president will be an African-American man. At the same time this summer, you went and saw things that were about a time when, as you point out, you wouldn't even have been able to march safely across a bridge. Tell me what it's like as a young person, sort of seeing that kind of gap in time.
It's nice. It's wonderful to be able to see that we did come so far in 50 years, but then it also reminds you that just because we have a black president does not mean that the world is erased of prejudice, that that there will be equal opportunity for middle-class African Americans. Having a black president was a huge achievement, but there's still so much more. We have so many more things to do. Our voting rights are being taken away. We have unequal education. There's the school to prison pipeline.
Sure.
We're not nearly as far as some people think that we are.
Yeah. So as you know, a young person growing up in Detroit, tell me about things that remind you of that, things that you see in your life that maybe suggest that we're not as far as people think we are.
Well, the public school system in Detroit, that's all I can say.
Sure. Are you a student in
No,
DPS?
I'm not.
No. Okay.
But it's just, the teachers there aren't always qualified to be teaching, and it's unfair to the students who do give their time and dedicate themselves to their schoolwork, just to be taught by teachers who don't exactly have the right qualifications to get them ahead, or their school, the grading is just everyone gets an A for coming to class, and then the students who work their hardest, they don't get the recognition that they deserve. They're just getting recognized as not being a problem child.
Right.
And it's a shame.
Yeah, no, it's a difference, right? There's a big difference between that and what some other people have. What about you, DeMonte? What do you see as a young person here as things that still seem like real challenges?
Well, of course I would have to go to school too.
Schools.
You know, I mean, it seems bad for the kids who actually do try their hardest. Like in Detroit, it's, I guess, different to be a good student. So therefore, when you are, they're probably not going to recognize you because their focus is on the bad. Well, not bad, but
yeah, there's trouble in a lot of classes, and there's incredible imbalances in terms of the resources that they have, and
like, it doesn't come as such a good thing that a student is trying. It comes as, well, you're trying. So, I mean, like, it seems so unfair for just about most.
Right. Yeah. I'm wondering, what would you tell a young person is the most important thing they could do? We've got about a minute left. The most important thing they could do to sort of get us forward the next 50 years to where we need to go?
One, we need to, of course, learn the history. Everybody needs
remember it, right?
Yeah, needs to know the history, remember it, and take the lessons from it. One of the first things we learned when we were at the King Center is that nonviolence and participation in democracy is a way of life.
Right.
And we have to know that that's our way of life, and it just doesn't, it's not an event. It doesn't,
Right.
you know.
It's something you have to do all the time.
All the time.
Every day.
Every day.
Okay, great lesson. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love to hear what you thought about today's program and get your ideas for future shows. So connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time on American Black Journal.
Lindsay wants to know.
So I'm curious, what's DTE Energy doing to improve their customer service?
Why don't we take a ride over there and let Rachel tell us? Hello.
Hello. Take a walk with me. Here at DC Energy, we're working very hard to improve our service, like answering every call under 1 minute and resolving the issue on the first call.
Wow, no passing the buck, huh?
Nope. And plus, we're adding over 100 customer service jobs right here in the state of Michigan.
I need to get a real job.
I'm going to send your application.
Thanks, Rachel. DTE Energy. Know your own power.
When I grow up, I want to be an architectural engineer.
Registered nurse.
The law enforcement.
A computer scientist.
A successful person.
Give Michigan's children the chance to aim high with quality early education.